Hello, welcome to another video delving into my past evangelical life and its traumas. Only this time, I wanted to talk about one of the goals that I have for myself after having left the fundamentalist world, based on the pitfall that I saw of people deconstructing from my former past faith, ending up in another rigid and extreme identity. Now, I had a comment on one of my videos recently. I was talking about abuse in the church, and this individual wanted to share with me a resource about some of the abuse that happens in the Catholic Church, and then mentioned a political comment along with that. I had to respond in a way that I suppose might be shocking and maybe deeply offensive to many others who, like me, have experienced the religious trauma of the fundamentalist church and identify that very strongly with conservatism, and thus the Republican Party. The problem that I see is, well, there's a few. I've seen enough information from different sides of the news cycle to discover that both sides are making up stuff about each other. Really legit making stuff up. And then based on that, deciding that whoever doesn't vote or think the way that we do is supposedly against us and wants us eliminated. I see that attitude showing up in both sides of the political aisle. And see, this is a big concern for me, that I don't end up adopting a new form of fundamentalism as a skeptic and as a person recovering from religious trauma. A big part of that is that I love to learn, and I see the world as more and more complex. The news cycle tries to make it less and less complex and more idiotic just to make you mad. That way you'll watch more of the news and the sponsors make more money. I'm not saying that just to be cynical. That's part of reality, but I also feel like so much has changed for me in my views in just the last year and in just the last month, that for that reason alone, I cannot assume that somebody who votes differently from me doesn't have a brain and doesn't care. We're all on a journey. We're all discovering. And the candidates, as they're portrayed in the news, do not reflect anything about who those people are. They just don't. They just don't. It's a temptation, has been for me in my past, and I want to overcome, to just take all of that frustration that I have in my life about my personal life and kind of divert its energy into getting angry about the politics happening in the world. Pretending that if certain people just got on my side, which is the only right side, that my life would be fixed. That's not the case. I don't want to lose energy thinking that way anymore. Politics and the presidential election cycle don't actually affect your life as much as you think that it does. I mean, it does. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not gaslighting you to tell you that none of your concerns are real. I don't mean that. I'm just saying that the biggest change that could happen in your life is actually much closer to home. It's in your mind and heart. And so many issues that we see represented by one party or the other were not always represented by them historically. Platforms can and do change, and there are people in either party who agree with some of the things that you agree with and support and are concerned about, as well as other issues that you disagree with, as well as other issues that are significant but never ever mentioned at all in the news cycle. And people have a right to make their decisions based on those issues. Just because we don't see them, just because we don't recognize them in our own life, doesn't really give us the right to demonize somebody who does have a totally different experience and votes differently because of platforms and issues that aren't a platform, that aren't being mentioned in the news. People in church sitting next to each other in a pew, singing hallelujah, voted differently this election. It's not as if every single person that's in the church world that hurt us in the past had no other issues or concerns in their life that might cause them to make a different choice in politics than the other person next to them. People in marginalized communities who we have been trained to think through, again, our superficial and distorted news media, we've been trained to think would never vote for a certain candidate, actually did. And their reasons for doing that will never get attention. This just doesn't say anything really about us. I don't want to be confused thinking that my voting card or who I select in this election or that election defines who I am, because that was how I used to think. I used to really, really, really identify so strongly with my political voting habits. I don't want to think that way again. I don't want to become rigidly encased in some alternative energy, just an alternative, not energy, identity, rigid identity. Just because I outgrew some misguided beliefs that I had. The potential to be misguided and misinformed doesn't get erased just because we leave behind the ideas and the environment that abused us in the past. That's really, really, really important to understand. So, I'm certain there's people in my life that might be disappointed that I didn't celebrate uproariously about the election, and people in my life who are disappointed that I didn't fall into the pits of despair about the election. It was the first election season of my life where I just went to bed. I didn't wait up for election results. That was the first time for me, and that's a big step for me. Because even though I deconstructed from being a Christian years ago, it was a lengthy process. And because of the way I was raised, it was almost worse to deconstruct from your politics than your religion. I kind of put that off as long as I could. And at this point, I have decided that neither party represents me. Doesn't mean I'm not going to vote, but I'm also not going to vote with the mindset that one side is good and one side is evil, that one side is going to take care of me and the other side is going to try to eliminate me. I can see how both sides of the aisle in politics are just making things up about each other, demonizing each other, throwing out hyperbole, and really taking away our energy from having productive conversations. There are people in either party, again, there are people in either party who agree with you and your concerns. We're not so monolithic in either party as we've been trained to think that we have been. And there's way more issues and concerns than the ones you're seeing portrayed, and there's way more solutions than the ones you're seeing being portrayed. I really, really, really wish that as Americans, whether fundamentalists or atheists, Republicans or Democrats, I really, really wish that we could have real conversations. We don't really have them anymore. I think that's the biggest problem. I don't think the problem is that one side or group of people has no heart and no brain and just wants our country destroyed, because either side is accusing the other of being that way. I don't think that's the case. This is hard. This is hard. I went through a lot of different thoughts and feelings just in the last month. And as a person who grew up to be a people pleaser and try to show my allegiance to my tribe, I found it pretty scary to step out of that identity and try to just be me, and me where I'm at, knowing I'm going to continue learning and that some of my views are going to probably continue evolving. And that even when that happens, that still doesn't mean that I've arrived at the God's honest truth finally. This world is so huge and it's so complicated. And I think most of us actually do care about each other. I think most of us are fairly kind-hearted. Despite the abuse and bigotry that I have seen and experienced in my life, I do think that most people are kind. I know that in my past life as a religious person, I was not trying to cause harm to the people that I injured. I wasn't trying to do that. I mean, to some extent, we can't avoid hurting people that we love because we are different. We're going to step on each other's toes sometimes. But that doesn't by itself mean that we hate each other. So I wish we could have real conversations. I wish that we could say some things that out loud that maybe they seem ignorant, maybe they seem bigoted, maybe they seem ridiculous, but they're also just things that have to be discussed just so we can learn. I feel like instead, most of the thrust of what is being said in the political sphere is not about a conversation, it's about shutting down a conversation. And both sides are accusing the other of trying to silence them. Go figure. Maybe we're both guilty. Yeah. Anyway, just some thoughts. A little bit different a video, but hopefully it'll be encouraging to you. I also recommend that you check out a channel called Timmy Gibson. Part of my inspiration for making this video was his comments on a recent video and how he wants to do his best to not adopt another rigid identity now that he's been an ex-fundamentalist pastor for about 6 years and deconstructing, and I really resonated with that concern. And so I wanted to share my own thoughts on it here. Have a great day.